Your phone isn't listening to you. It is reading your mind, though. I've got a Trenta Mango Strawberry Lemonade Refresher with no ice, and I strongly suggest you grab your caffeine delivery system of choice because we need to have a serious talk. Specifically, we need to talk about something that happens to basically everyone with a smartphone. You mentioned something out loud. Shoes, maybe, or Disney, or that weird rash. And then, 10 minutes later, there's an ad for it on Instagram, on YouTube, somewhere. And the conclusion that almost everyone reaches is obvious. The phone heard me. It's a completely reasonable conclusion. It's also wrong. And once I explain what's really happening, I think you'll agree that the real answer is considerably more unsettling than a microphone. Today, I'm not just skimming the surface. We'll look under the hood at the actual surveillance economy that your phone is plugged into, what it's collecting, who's selling it, and who's buying it. And then we're going to talk about what you can actually do about it. Just like my smart TV and ISP surveillance videos, I'm not going to tell you about a problem without also telling you how to solve it. But with most hard tasks, you make the decision on how far you want to go, and that choice goes a long way towards determining your outcome. So I'm going to explain what you can do from easy to hard, from things that take 5 minutes to things that require buying a different phone and installing a different operating system on it. It's a continuum, and you can improve your situation even with the lowest effort options. Then I'm going to talk about the mistakes that people make with all of these tools that completely undo the privacy that they think they have. Welcome back to Dad Ruins Everything. You guys have been asking for this since the Smart TV video, so today I ruin the comfortable fiction that you have any privacy on your phone. But like I said, I'll try to help you claw some of it back. I've been working on this video for 5 months, and I think the video is interesting, but it's also long. Consider yourself warned and use the chapter markers if there's a section you're not interested in. We'll start with part 1. Your phone is not listening to you, but it also doesn't have to. The microphone theory has been tested, and it didn't hold up. Researchers at Northeastern University spent a year specifically looking for evidence of unauthorized microphone activation in apps. They analyzed over 17,000 Android apps across 10 devices, and they found no cases of secret audio recording. No matter how certain you are, you really can't argue with empirical findings. This research has been conducted many times, on various scales, in different countries, and the results have been the same. Multiple independent security researchers, private and public, students and professionals, people with government funding, privacy and security professionals. There's no conspiracy, and the consensus is consistent. Large-scale audio surveillance for ad targeting isn't happening, and it makes no sense that it would. Continuously streaming and processing audio from hundreds of millions of devices would generate identifiable bandwidth costs, enormous processing costs, and an enormous paper trail. Someone would have found it by now, and there would definitely be whistleblowers. Facebook has denied it, Google has denied it. In October of 25, Instagram's head Adam Mosseri posted publicly to dispel the myth again, right as Meta announced they'd be using data from AI interactions to target ads, which was either spectacular timing or the most accidentally self-aware corporate communication in recent memory. So why does it feel like the phone is listening? Well, that's because the advertising industry has built something that's just as invasive as a microphone without breaking the law the way a microphone would. What's actually happening is your location data is being sold. Your carrier knows everywhere you've been. Every app you've granted location permission to is tracking you continuously. That data gets aggregated, packaged, and sold to data brokers who sell it to advertisers. If you walked past a mattress store last Tuesday, there's a reasonable chance an ad network knows that and can target you accordingly. In April of 24, the FCC fined AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, and Verizon for nearly $200 million for illegally selling customer location data without consent. The carriers paid the fines. The practices, though, by most accounts, have continued. So you leave more in plain sight than you realize. Your browsing history, your search queries, what you clicked, how long you paused on a video, what you bought online, and what you almost bought and didn't, all of it feeds into behavioral profiles. Algorithms built on billions of data points can infer things about what you want before you consciously know you want them. These ads aren't reading your mind, they're reading your history. and your social graph is doing a lot of the work. You don't have to search for something for the algorithm to surface it. If your spouse searched for camping gear or your friend group has been buying espresso equipment, platforms infer shared interests and household consumption patterns. The eerily accurate ad you saw isn't about someone listening to you. It's about everyone around you. And coincidences register, misses don't. You see between 50 and 500 ads a day, depending on how you use the internet. When one matches something you said out loud, you remember it with startling clarity. When hundreds don't, you forget them immediately. This is classic confirmation bias, and the advertising industry has gotten so good at behavioral targeting that the hit rate is high enough to feel genuinely uncanny. In 2024, an internal pitch deck from Cox Media Group leaked, describing something they called active listening, a product they claimed that could capture real-world audio via smart devices for ad targeting. Every major tech company immediately and loudly distanced themselves from it. Google removed CMG from its partner program. The details of whether this was a real operational product or an aspirational sales pitch were never fully resolved. But what it confirmed is that at least some people in the advertising industry would absolutely do this if they thought they could get away with it. The point isn't that your phone will never listen to you. The point is that it doesn't have to. What's already been built is more comprehensive than a microphone. In terms of what you should actually be worried about, there's a part buried within the Northeastern Study's findings. While researchers found no evidence of audio surveillance, they did find that some apps were taking hidden screenshots and video of users' screens and sending them to third-party servers, including one food delivery app that was found doing this without disclosing it. Not audio, screen captures, which is in a lot of ways worse. A screenshot of your banking app, your medical records portal, or your private messages is considerably more actionable than a recording of you saying the word shoes. And there are other documented practices that don't require a microphone either. Apps that request microphone, location, and contact access with no functional reason to need them, and use all of it when you grant it. Software development kit level tracking that follows you across apps and platforms, building behavioral profiles that span your entire phone. Browser fingerprinting that identifies your device without cookies, making clear cookies basically meaningless. Carrier-level location data sales, which, as I mentioned, continue even after the $200 million in FCC fines. Ultrasonic beacons embedded in TV commercials and retail environments that silently ping apps on your phone to confirm that you are physically present. Researchers found 234 Android apps using this technology as recently as 2017, and the underlying tech has never gone away. Almost none of this requires a microphone. All of it is more invasive and more systematic than the listening theory imagines. So now that you know what's actually happening, let's talk about what you can do about it. These are the layers, from easiest to I need to buy a different phone. This is not an all or nothing situation. There are a lot of things you can do, and many of them stack on top of each other. You don't have to do all of them. You don't have to do them in any particular order. The more layers you add, the harder you are to track, profile, and monetize. I'm going to go from the things that anyone can do in 5 minutes to the things that require flashing a new operating system onto a phone that you bought with cash. You can stop anywhere on that spectrum and still be meaningfully better off than you were before. I'll also call out where certain tools are mutually exclusive, because some of them are, and if you don't know that going in, you're going to waste your time and get frustrated. The first layer is the 5-minute stuff. This generally costs nothing, takes almost no time, and yet most people watching this haven't done them. Audit and revoke app permissions. Go into your phone settings and look at which apps have access to your location, microphone, camera, and contacts. Most apps don't need most of those things. A weather app needs location. A calculator does not need your contacts. A flashlight app doesn't need anything. On both iOS and Android, set location access to only while using, for any app that doesn't have a legitimate reason to track you in the background. Almost nothing needs background location. Navigation apps? Yes. Everything else? Probably not. Apps can check to see what permissions they've been granted, and some complain when the gratuitous permissions they've requested have been turned down or revoked entirely. If an app does that, then maybe you shouldn't have that app anymore. Next, turn off advertising ID tracking. This came up in the smart TV video, but your phones have advertising IDs too. It's not that companies won't still try to use fingerprinting techniques to identify you, but you don't have to be wearing a virtual license plate. On the screen are instructions on how to disable this on iPhone and Android. This doesn't stop all tracking, but it does remove one of the most explicit and legally sanctioned tracking mechanisms, and it takes about 90 seconds. Next, you can change your DNS. I've covered this in my ISP surveillance video, but by default, your DNS queries, which are essentially a log of every website you visit, go to your carrier or your ISP. You can change this to a privacy-respecting provider like NextDNS or Quad9 in about 2 minutes. They don't sell your query history, and they actively block known tracking and malware domains. On iOS, you can install a DNS configuration profile. On Android, you can go to Settings and set private DNS. Done. Or you can follow my Pi-hole or AdGuard home videos with Tailscale and self-host in order to not have to trust anyone. Using Tailscale in conjunction with some of the other tools on this list isn't possible though. So you'll either have to make some tough choices or you can host your DNS filtering on a VPS. Next, stop using Chrome. Stop using Google Search. Chrome is a data collection product with a browser attached to it. Switch to Firefox with uBlock, Origin, or Brave. Both are free, both are fast, and neither is reporting your browsing habits back to an advertising company. Safari? It's better, but the default search engine is still Google. You'll need to change it if you want to improve your privacy. DuckDuckGo, Brave Search, and StartPage are all reasonable Google alternatives that don't build a behavioral profile with your search history. This is one of the single easiest high-impact changes you can make. The next layer is stuff that takes an hour. It's still accessible. It might cost a few dollars a month. It's completely worth it. So within this category is using a VPN. Now the key here is to understand what it does and doesn't do. I've done a full video on VPNs, so I'm going to give you a condensed version here. If you want to do the deep dive, go watch that video. The short version is this: VPNs are much more heavily marketed than they are useful, and most of what they're advertised to do either doesn't work the way they claim to or stopped being relevant years ago. What a VPN actually does: it hides your IP address from the websites you visit. It masks your traffic from your ISP and can spoof your geolocation. That's it. What it doesn't do is make you anonymous. The VPN provider sees everything your ISP used to see. You're not eliminating a surveillance point, you're moving it. If a VPN provider tells you that they don't keep logs, you have no way to verify that. The technical term for this is trust me, bro. The protect yourself on the public Wi-Fi argument, which is the one you hear in most ads, is largely obsolete. Over 95% of all internet traffic is encrypted with secure HTTP, and it's not 2009 anymore. So the attack scenarios that VPNs used to guard against on public networks basically don't work the same way. This doesn't mean VPNs are useless. It means the main thing they're advertised for isn't really the point. Proton and Mullvad are the best commercial VPNs, in my opinion, but you can always just stand up WireGuard on a VPS instead. One technical conflict to know about: on both Android and iOS, a VPN app and a firewall app compete for the same system resource, and the OS only allows one at a time. You can't run both simultaneously. On Android, Rethink DNS is a more advanced option that combines a firewall and VPN tunneling into one app, but it's more complex to configure. Pick your approach before you start. Next, use alias email addresses. Every time you sign up for anything, you hand your email address to a service that may sell it, get breached, or both. An alias email service generates unique forwarding addresses that route to your real inbox. You give every service a different alias. When you start getting spam, you know exactly which company sold you out. You kill that alias, the spam stops, and your real email address stays clean. Simple Login, now owned by Proton and included with Proton Unlimited, and ADI.io, which has a very generous free tier, are the most commonly recommended options. Apple's Hide My Email works well if you're already in the Apple ecosystem. If you're not using an alias service, you're essentially handing every company you do business with a skeleton key to your identity, and that's probably not what you want. Next, use a password manager. Technically, this is more security than privacy, but the two are kind of inseparable. The TLDR is that most people reuse passwords. Companies are breached all of the time, so a breach at one service hands an attacker credentials to everything else. I have a whole video on password managers, so you should check that out if you want a deeper dive. Pick a password manager, generate a unique random password for every account, and never think about passwords again. I use KeePass, but there are plenty of other good options available. And the last item on this layer is using virtual payment cards. Privacy.com generates virtual debit card numbers, a unique number per merchant with spending limits you set. Your real card never touches a merchant server, and if a merchant ever gets breached, or if a subscription service makes itself intentionally difficult to cancel, you just delete the card. Done. The next layer is stuff that requires some effort. More time, possibly more money, definitely more technical comfort, and the payoff is proportionally bigger. First is switching your messaging app. SMS is not secure. The content runs over carrier infrastructure, can be intercepted, and the metadata is logged by every carrier. Signal, on the other hand, is end-to-end encrypted, free, open source, and has been independently audited. If the people you want to communicate with will use it, use it. For what it's worth, iMessage is end-to-end encrypted between Apple devices. WhatsApp is encrypted but owned by Meta, which retains the metadata. Telegram is only encrypted for secret chats by default, and the company's overall security posture has attracted legitimate criticism. Signal is the clear answer if this matters to you. Next, install a firewall app. This is one of the most genuinely eye-opening things you can do. Install NetGuard on Android. It's free, open source, and requires no root access. And then watch what your apps try to connect to. NetGuard shows you every outbound connection all of your apps attempt, unless you block them on a per app, per destination basis. When you first set it to block by default and start seeing notifications, a flashlight app that calls home at 4 a.m., a game trying to reach 12 different ad networks while you're asleep, it's genuinely radicalizing. The limitation that you need to know about is that NetGuard uses Android's VPN service to function, which means that you can't run it alongside a traditional VPN app or Tailscale simultaneously. The same conflict exists on iOS with Lockdown. Both platforms only allow one VPN at a time. Rethink DNS is a powerful alternative that supports WireGuard tunneling alongside the firewall, but it's considerably more complex to configure. Pick your approach before you start. Running both doesn't work. On iOS, Lockdown is the equivalent. Same concept, adapted for iOS's more constrained environment. Keep in mind you can use the application firewall periodically to audit your apps, and you don't have to run it all of the time. The next layer is your carrier. We've talked about apps, browsers, DNS, and firewalls. All of that is about what happens on your device. This layer is about the entity that connects your device to the world, your carrier, and it's one that most people never think to address. Your carrier, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, or whoever is printing your bill every month, knows more about you than almost any other entity you interact with. They know every number you've called and how long you've talked, every text you've sent, every cell tower your phone has touched, which means a continuous years-long log of your physical location. That data has been sold to bounty hunters, handed to law enforcement without warrants, exposed in breach after breach, and used in ways that would make most people genuinely uncomfortable if they thought about it for more than a few seconds. And like I mentioned before, in April of 24, the FCC fined AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, and Verizon nearly $200 million for illegally selling customer location data without their consent. And like I said before, they paid the fines, but they've continued the practices. But there are now actual alternatives, real ones, not apps, not VPNs, but actual carriers built from the ground up not collecting this information. Before I get into specifics, you will need to understand that these services fall into two very different categories and that conflating them will lead you to the wrong choice. The first is a full privacy MVNO, which is an actual US phone carrier, albeit one with a virtual network. You get a real phone number, unlimited talk and text, data, the whole thing. It replaces your Verizon or T-Mobile plan. The second is a no KYC eSIM. KYC stands for Know Your Customer. So a no KYC eSIM provides anonymous data connectivity. This is typically global, pay-as-you-go, and crypto only. It doesn't replace your carrier. As with anything else, there are exceptions. They are generally used for travel, secondary use, or by people who want a data connection that isn't tied to their identity at all. There are different tools and different threat models, and you should know which one you need before you pull out your wallet. Cape is a privacy MVNO, and it's the most technically impressive thing in this space, with it not being particularly close to any of its competition. I've been using Cape for almost 3 months with no issues. Most MVNOs are just resellers. They buy wholesale access from Verizon or T-Mobile and put a sticker on it and call it a business. Cape actually built and runs its own mobile core, the software at the center of how a cellular network actually operates. I have a personal appreciation for this because one of my jobs was at a UCaaS company. Having their own core matters because it's the only way to implement certain privacy protections at a network level where they actually do something. The flagship feature is IMSI rotation. IMSI stands for International Mobile Subscriber ID, and it's a unique identifier embedded in your SIM that carriers and surveillance systems use to track you persistently over time. This works because your IMSI generally doesn't change. Cape, on the other hand, changes it every 24 hours, which makes long-term tracking significantly harder. They also provide protection against SS7 attacks, a decades-old signaling protocol vulnerability that the US government flagged as a serious national security issue, and they use cryptographic keys instead of pins for authentication, which neutralizes SIM swapping almost entirely. They don't collect your name. They don't store your payment information. Even their website doesn't have a cookie banner, which at this point is basically a personality statement. It's $99 a month, taxes included, no surprises. A full Proton Unlimited subscription is bundled with it. There's a referral program where 5 active referrals makes the plan free. And they've raised $191 million in venture capital, so they're not going to disappear next quarter. The downsides are obvious. It's $100 a month. It's US only with limited international roaming. If these two things are acceptable to you, it's the clear winner in this tier. Next, we have Phreeli. Cape minimizes what gets collected. Phreeli, on the other hand, doesn't have their own mobile core, but they do make sign-up anonymous by design. The founder, Nicholas Merrill, spent over a decade fighting the FBI in federal court over a national security letter they served him demanding customer records. He eventually won, after years of being legally prohibited from even telling anyone the case existed. That's not a marketing story. That's literally who built this company. To sign up for Phreeli, you give them a ZIP+4 code. That's it. No name, no address, no ID, no credit check. Payments are run through something called double-blind armadillo. It's a zero-knowledge cryptographic architecture that confirms payment without linking your card to your account. In case you don't want to trust that, you can also pay with Zcash or Monero. And you can even pull the eSIM through Tor if you want. It runs on T-Mobile's network, so the coverage is solid. Plans start at $25 a month for 2 gigabytes of usage and up to $85 for 40 gigabytes. All taxes included, no contracts. The honest trade-off is that Phreeli doesn't have Cape's network-level protections. T-Mobile still sees your tower location and your device's IMEI. What Phreeli does break is the link between your phone activity and your identity. The carrier-side record stops at your zip code. That's meaningful. It's just a different layer of problem than what Cape is solving. Phreeli launched in late 2025, so it's still very new. Louis Rossmann is affiliated with Phreeli, and the MVNO is worth serious consideration, if you have the proper OPSEC practices to make the most of it. Next is SilentLink. If you travel internationally and want to start a data connection that literally knows nothing about you, SilentLink is where you start. Zero sign-up. Not even an email address. You pick a plan, pay in Bitcoin, Monero, or a handful of other crypto options, and you get a QR code. Scan it, you're online. Works in 160 countries. The feature that makes it genuinely useful for irregular travelers is that your balance never expires. If you go overseas twice a year, you're not throwing away unused data or scrambling to buy a new plan before you leave. You load it, it sits there, and you use it when you need it. It's data focused, so there are no traditional voice calls. You use Signal, WhatsApp, or VoIP apps. There's an optional phone number add-on if you need something for SMS verification. Things to know going in. The eSIM installs once and cannot be moved to a new device. So don't install it and then factory reset your phone. Pricing varies considerably by region and can get expensive in some countries. And they don't tell you which country your traffic will exit through before you activate, which matters if you need a specific IP location for geosensitive services. Next are eSIM and Nada Nada. eSIM does most of what Silent Link does, but costs 40 to 60% less in most regions, and this is the differentiator, is completely transparent about routing before you buy. You can see what country your traffic will exit through before you commit. Data only, over 170 countries, no account, crypto self-hosted BTC Pay server. The main thing is that it doesn't have Silent Link's never expiring balance. Nada Nada is the outlier in this whole space. It's the only no KYC provider that bundles eSIM data, a WireGuard VPN, and rental phone numbers into a single service, all with no account required. Plans start at 99 cents, and it accepts the widest range of payments of anyone in this category, including Apple Pay, Google Pay, alongside crypto. It's also the newest and least independently vetted of the group, so keep that in mind. But there is a limitation that applies to all of these, and I want to be direct about this because it's important. None of these services, not even CAPE, can hide your device's IMEI from the cell towers it connects to. Your physical location is always visible to the underlying network infrastructure. The privacy wins here are real and meaningful, but they're also specifically about minimizing identity linkage and data protection. They are not a path to total invisibility. For most people, minimizing identity linkage is exactly what they want. What you're willing to pay for that is a question that only you can answer. The next layer is the deep end. These are not for everyone, but they exist, they work, and if your situation warrants them, you should know about these options. Alternative phone operating systems. Your phone's operating system is the deepest layer of what it knows about you. Stock Android is, let's be direct about this, a data collection platform built by an advertising company. Stock iOS is significantly better. Apple has made privacy a genuine differentiator and backs it up with real technical architecture. But you're still on Apple's platform and your data still passes through services you don't control. For Android users who want to go further, there are alternatives. For part of this video, I bought a pre-owned Google Pixel 7 Pro. Not only would it have defeated the purpose of reusing a phone whose IMEI was linked to my identity, but some of these alternatives actually require a Pixel. GrapheneOS is the hardened option. It runs on Google Pixel devices, which is objectively pretty funny, given that it exists specifically to keep Google out of your phone. It applies aggressive security hardening on top of the open source Android base. Memory hardening, strict app sandboxing, a locked and relockable bootloader, and a process model that spawns fresh processes rather than reusing them. This closes off a whole class of attacks that stock Android doesn't protect against. Security researchers consistently rank it as the strongest option available. The app situation is more nuanced than things don't work. GrapheneOS ships with sandboxed Google Play. You install it yourself from the built-in App Store if you want it. And when you do, Google Play Services runs as an ordinary app with no special system privileges. It can't see hardware identifiers it shouldn't see. It can't access the OS backend the way it normally does. And you could revoke its permissions like any other app. For most day-to-day use, the experience is indistinguishable from stock Android. You get the Play Store, your apps update normally, push notifications work, and Google Maps works. Where things get complicated is with apps that actively resist running on modified systems. Banking apps are the most common pain point. Some of them use Google Play's Integrity API to verify that they're running on an unmodified Google-certified device. Most banking apps work fine on GrapheneOS. Some don't, or require some configuration. Google Pay doesn't work and most likely never will, because it's specifically designed to require the deep system access that GrapheneOS deliberately refuses to grant. Push notifications occasionally need extra setup. You have to make sure that the Sandbox Play profile has unrestricted battery and network access, otherwise things like WhatsApp or email notifications arrive late or not at all. The GrapheneOS community maintains a running list of app compatibility status. It's not short, but the vast majority of apps on it work fine. The setup itself requires some, technical comfort. You need to unlock the bootloader, flash the OS, and then relock the bootloader, which GrapheneOS is specifically designed to support. It's not something you do in an afternoon if you've never flashed firmware before, but it's well documented and the GrapheneOS website walks you through it. The day-to-day experience after setup is genuinely close to normal Android. The hardening mostly operates invisibly. You'll notice the extra permissions granularity. You can grant apps network access, storage access, and sensor access independently. That's a feature, not a problem. Differentiators that I care about are the network permission toggle. GrapheneOS adds a per-app network access toggle that stock Android doesn't have. This is significant. You can grant an app camera access but block it from making any network connections. So even if it records something, it can't exfiltrate it. Stock Android has no equivalent. Sensors permission. GrapheneOS adds a toggle for sensors access, accelerometer, gyroscope, etc. Stock Android grants this to all apps by default with no user control. And then stricter sandboxing. Even when Google Play services are installed, it can't use camera or mic APIs in a way that bypasses the sandbox. On stock Android, Play Services has system-level privileges that technically allow it to do things that apps can't. For what it's worth, I didn't find GrapheneOS to be difficult to load, and I plan on continuing with it as my primary phone. CalyxOS is an accessible option, also primarily for Pixel devices with some Motorola and Fairphone support. Where GrapheneOS strips Google out and lets you add back a sandboxed version, CalyxOS ships with microG baked in. An open-source reimplementation of Google's core libraries that impersonates Google Play services well enough that most apps never know the difference. In practice, CalyxOS is the closest thing to stock Android that isn't stock Android. App compatibility is high out of the box. Banking apps tend to work better here than on GrapheneOS without extra configuration. And the overall experience is genuinely close to what most people are used to. If you hand a CalyxOS phone to someone who's never heard of it, they'll probably just use it without noticing anything is different. That accessibility is the whole point. The trade-off is that microG's approach involves a technique called signature spoofing. It presents itself to apps as if it were the real Google Play services. This is architecturally different from GrapheneOS's sandboxed approach, and security researchers note that it introduces its own risks, even if they're different risks than having real Google Play services installed. CalyxOS also applies fewer low-level exploit mitigations than GrapheneOS. It's not insecure, it's meaningfully better than stock Android, but if your threat model warrants maximum hardening, the trade-offs matter. Google Pay doesn't work here either, for the same reasons as GrapheneOS. The CalyxOS Plexus database is a community-maintained resource that tracks which apps work, which partially work, and which don't work, which is worth checking before you commit if you have specific app dependencies. I loaded CalyxOS too, and the process wasn't bad. Subjectively, I didn't like it as much as Graphene, and it feels a bit more like a community project to me than an alternative to a commercial phone OS. Your mileage may vary. Then there's LineageOS. This is the anything goes option, and it's a little different in character from the other two. It supports an enormous range of hardware, hundreds of devices, including many that haven't seen an official software update in years. The primary use case is extending the life of older hardware, not hardening a current device. Think of this as the OpenWRT of phone operating systems. The day-to-day experience varies significantly depending on which device you're running it on and who maintains that specific build. On a well-maintained device with an active community maintainer, it can be very good. Recent Android version, recent security patches, solid performance. On a device with a less active maintainer or an older community build, it can be noticeably rougher around the edges. App compatibility on a clean LineageOS install without Google services is worse than either of the two options. You're essentially running bare AOSP without the Google scaffolding that most apps assume is present. You can add microG manually to improve this, or you can install full Google Play services. But at that point, you're doing a lot of configuration for a result that's still less polished than CalyxOS. The security concern worth knowing is that many LineageOS device builds require leaving the bootloader unlocked, because the device doesn't support relocking with a custom OS. An unlocked bootloader means that someone with physical access to your phone can boot into recovery and modify the system without your PIN. For most people's threat models, this isn't a practical concern, but it's why security researchers consistently rank LineageOS below the other two. Think of it as privacy tooling, not security hardening. And really, for the old Motorola junk tier phone I loaded it on, there are no alternatives. These options are mutually exclusive of each other and with stock Android. You pick one OS. You don't layer them. If you're on an Apple phone and you're comfortable there, you don't really have any options. Stock iOS with good practices is better than the preloaded OS on most Android phones, so there's that. However, GrapheneOS and CalyxOS are on a completely different level, where the opaque decisions and practices at the operating system level aren't left to a vendor you don't have a reason to trust. But why would you trust whomever maintains GrapheneOS and CalyxOS? Well, it's because you can pull the source code for either from GitHub and see everything it's doing. That kind of transparency is important when you're talking about a device that accesses and displays critical data. Then there's network level blocking at home. Pi-hole and AdGuard Home are DNS-based blockers that run on your home network and filter tracking and ad domains for every device in your house. Phones, smart TVs, gaming consoles, all of it, with no per-device configuration. I've covered both of these in my previous videos. When you leave home, you can keep using your blocker if you followed my Tailscale tutorial. If your phone's VPN limitation puts you into an eeny meeny miny mo situation, just remember you can host your blocker on a VPS. Network level DNS filtering is one of the best value for effort things you can do for whole home privacy. Part 3. One phone, two phones, or something in between. Everything we've covered so far exists in a stack, but all of it, the privacy MVNO, the firewall app, the alias emails, even the alternate operating system runs on one piece of hardware. And that hardware has a permanent identifier that follows it everywhere it goes. Your IMEI is burned into the radio hardware of your phone at the factory. Every cell tower you connect to logs it. It doesn't change when you swap SIMs. It doesn't change when you flash a new OS. It doesn't change when you do a factory reset. If your phone was ever connected to your real identity, activated at a carrier store, signed into a Google account, purchased with a credit card, then that IMEI has a thread back to you, and it always will. Whether that matters to you depends entirely on what you're actually trying to protect against. And the honest answer is that most people don't need to care about IMEI level identity linkage. But some do. So let's talk about the approaches. Who each one is for, what it costs, and what you're giving up. The first approach is one phone, well configured. This is the right setup for the vast majority of people watching this video. If your concern is commercial surveillance, ad targeting, data broker profiles, carrier data sales, app tracking, then one phone with the layers from Part 2 applied will address it meaningfully. You don't need hardware separation to stop being profiled by advertisers. You need permissions revocation, DNS filtering, alias emails, a private browser, and ideally a privacy MVNO. All of that runs on one phone. Android's built-in user profiles, available on stock Android and more robustly implemented on GrapheneOS, give you a meaningful amount of compartmentalization without a second device. Your personal profile has your bank, your main email, your social accounts. The second profile has your private browsing, your anonymous accounts, your VPN. Apps in one profile genuinely cannot see apps in the other. The IMEI is shared, but everything running on top is isolated. But you have the SMS verification problem. Creating accounts without handing over your real phone number is solvable on one phone. Services like MySudo and JMP Chat give you alias phone numbers that can receive texts and calls and route them through a voice over IP app. You give each service a different alias number for verification. Your real number is never exposed, and the alias number has no paper trail back to you as long as you paid for it without a linked identity. Who is this for? Pretty much everyone. The person who's sick of targeted ads, concerned about data brokers, wants to stop feeding Google and Meta everything about their life, and wants to protect themselves from the kind of commercial surveillance that's become normalized. That's most people, and one phone handles it. The next approach is one phone, no carrier, data-only SIM with SMS aliasing. This one is underrepresented in most privacy guides, and it deserves its own entry because it addresses something Approach 1 fundamentally can't, and that's the carrier relationship itself. Even with a privacy MVNO like Cape or Phreeli, there's still a carrier with some record of your device on their network. That record can be subpoenaed, it can be breached. The carrier might change ownership, and therefore the policy. In this approach, there's no carrier relationship at all. One phone, one no KYC eSIM from a provider like SilentLink or PicaSIM for data, and alias number services like MySudo or JMP Chat for any SMS verification or voice calls you actually need. The phone number people reach you on lives in the app, not in a carrier record. The privacy gain over approach one is specific and meaningful. Carriers are a legal target. Law enforcement can subpoena CAPE or Phreeli and get whatever records exist. They cannot subpoena a no KYC eSIM provider that doesn't have your records, because those providers were designed from the ground up not to collect them. Tower records still log your IMEI when you connect to cell infrastructure. There's no account, no billing record, and no identity to attach it to at the carrier level. It's also potentially cheaper than a privacy MVNO. No KYC eSIM data is inexpensive. You're paying for gigabytes, not a monthly plan. And most people use less data on cellular than they think when Wi-Fi is available at home and work. MySudo runs a few dollars a month. You could replace a $99 CAPE plan with this approach for $15 to $25 a month total, depending on how much data you actually use on the go. The trade-offs are real and worth stating plainly. Some services refuse to accept voice over IP numbers for SMS verification. Certain banks, some government portals, some healthcare systems. This isn't universal, but it's not rare either. And there's no universal workaround. You'll need to audit your life for dependencies on real numbers before committing to this. Voice call reliability depends on data signal quality, which is fine on good connectivity and frustrating on bad connectivity. And emergency calling, 911 in the US, works through voice over IP apps by law, but the implementation is less reliable than a traditional carrier and requires setup in your app of choice before you need it, not during. One thing this approach is genuinely well suited for: international travel. No KYC eSIM providers like SilentLink cover 160 plus countries. You leave the country and your data connection just works. No carrier relationship, no roaming fees, and no carrier in either country that knows who you are. If you travel frequently, this is an approach that makes sense for practical reasons, entirely apart from the privacy benefit. Who is this for? People who want to eliminate the carrier relationship entirely without buying additional hardware, frequent international travelers, people who are already signal first for communication and only occasionally need a number for verification, and anyone whose threat model significantly includes carrier subpoenas or record requests rather than just commercial surveillance. The third approach is one primary phone plus a data-only device with SMS aliasing. This is the setup for people who want genuine behavioral separation and either don't trust themselves to maintain profile discipline on one device, or want to keep their anonymous activity on hardware that's never touching their real identity. But they don't need full IMEI anonymity. The primary phone handles everything identity linked: your real number, your bank, your work email, your personal social accounts. It runs whatever OS and configuration you're comfortable with. The second device, which can be an older phone or a cheap Android device purchased new, runs GrapheneOS or CalyxOS, carries a no KYC eSIM for data, and handles everything you want disconnected from your real identity. It has no traditional phone number. Voice calls and text, where needed, happen through voice over IP apps and SMS alias services. The data-only device is where you browse privately, manage anonymous accounts, use Signal with non-real identity numbers, and generally do things that you'd rather not have connected to your carrier record. The no KYC eSIM, SilentLink, PicaSIM, or similar, gives it data connectivity with no identity attached. MySudo and JMP Chat handles any SMS or voice verification you need on that device. The hardware separation does something profile separation can't fully replicate. It enforces the compartmentalization by making it physically inconvenient to cross the streams. You have to consciously switch devices. That friction is a feature. Most privacy failures happen because the separation was easy to break, not because someone decided to blow it up intentionally. Who is this for? Journalists, researchers, activists, people with abusive exes who are technically sophisticated, people who work in sensitive industries, and anyone whose anonymous activity has a real consequence if it gets linked back to them. Also, anyone who's tried the one phone approach and found themselves not maintaining it. The second device doesn't need to be expensive. A used Pixel 6 bought with cash and flashed with GrapheneOS costs a couple $100 and does everything described here. I got my used Pixel 7 Pro for about $230. The fourth approach is two phones with IMEI separation. This is the setup where the second device has never touched your real identity in any way. It was purchased with cash from a store with no loyalty card. It has never been signed into an account with your name on it. It is never connected to your home Wi-Fi. The SIM in it is a no KYC option. The OS is GrapheneOS installed without connecting the device to any personal account during setup. The purpose of this level of separation is to specifically prevent IMEI-based location correlation. If your threat model includes someone querying cell tower records to establish where a particular IMEI was at a given time, and connecting that to your real identity through a separate IMEI or carrier record, this is the configuration that addresses it. It's not about commercial surveillance anymore. It's about preventing the kind of location and identity correlation that law enforcement, intelligence services, or a highly motivated private actor can perform. A few things that will undo this setup immediately if you're not careful. Carrying both phones to the same locations, because tower records will co-locate them. Connecting the anonymous device to any Wi-Fi network also be used by your real phone, or ever logging into any account on the anonymous device that's been accessed from your real device. Any of these can create a co-location event or account linkage that ties the two identities together. The operational discipline required to maintain this is significant, and most people underestimate it. Who is this for? A small number of people with specific and serious threat models. Whistleblowers, investigative journalists working on sensitive stories, people fleeing dangerous situations who need to prevent a determined adversary from locating them, people in certain countries where the government actively correlates phone identities. This is not a setup most people need, and suggesting otherwise would be alarmist. But for the people who need it, understanding the requirements is important, because a two-phone setup that's executed sloppily gives a false sense of security that may actually be worse than knowing your limitations on a single device. Here's a companion table for these options and how they stack up at a glance. One more thing worth saying out loud: the two-phone approach is not inherently more private than a one-phone approach if you don't execute the operational side correctly. A well-configured single phone with profile separation, a privacy MVNO, alias emails, and a firewall app will protect most people better than a sloppily configured two-phone setup where both devices go everywhere together and occasionally share the same Wi-Fi network. Know your threat model. Build to match it. Don't build more than you can maintain. Now to the fun section. The mistakes that undo everything. This is the section that nobody talks about, and it might be the most important one. You can implement every single tool and practice in this video, and you can still completely compromise your own privacy. Not because the tools don't work, but because of how you use them. These are the most common mistakes, and some of them are embarrassingly easy to make. The first one is porting your existing phone number to a privacy MVNO. This is the big one, and it goes first because it's the most common mistake, and it's the one that most visibly undermines what you're paying for. Your phone number is a persistent identifier. You've had it for years. It is connected to your real name in dozens of places: carrier records, bank accounts, two-factor authentication setups, medical records, loyalty programs, background check files, data broker databases. The number itself is a thread that pulls on your entire identity. And when you port that number to Cape or Phreeli, you bring all of that baggage with you. The privacy MVNO now has a confirmed mapping between your number and you because you provide it in the porting process. Anyone with access to the number can still trace it backward through existing records. Privacy protections you were paying for are substantially undermined from the moment you complete the transfer. If you want a clean break, get a new number. Don't port the old one. You take the new number and build fresh. New accounts where feasible, new contacts who know the new number, new two-factor setups. This is genuinely inconvenient. It's also the only way to actually sever the link. For most people, the practical middle ground is to use the new number as a secondary line. A Cape or Phreeli number for new things going forward, while keeping the old number for existing relationships and accounts you're not ready to migrate. Compartmentalization isn't perfect, but it's real. 2. Logging into personal accounts over your private connection. You set up a no KYC eSIM. You paid with Monero. You activated it through Tor. You did everything right. And then you opened Instagram. The moment you authenticate to any account that's tied to your real identity, Google, Facebook, your regular email, your bank, you've reattached the thread. The activity on that account from that connection is now associated with you. The privacy of the connection layer is irrelevant. You logged in. A private connection is only private if you use it for things that aren't already linked to your real identity. If you want to use social media on an anonymous SIM, you need an anonymous social media account. If you want to use email, it needs to be an account with no ties to your name. Most people are not willing to maintain that level of separation in practice, which is fine, but you should understand what you're giving up if you don't. 3. Using your existing device. Your phone has an IMEI, a hardware identifier that every tower you connect to can see. If you bought that phone with a credit card, signed into your Google or Apple account, or activated it under your name at a carrier store, that IMEI points back to you. The no KYC SIM in the phone that's registered to your identity is not particularly anonymous. The SIM is unlinked. The device is not. For meaningful hardware level anonymity, you need a device purchased with cash, never signed into any personal account, and set up with no connection to your existing identity. That's a significant operational commitment that most people are not going to make. Understanding the limitation is still worth doing. 4. Contaminating your compartments. Compartmentalization only works if you maintain it consistently, and this is where most people quietly fail. If you create an anonymous email address and then send a test email to your regular address, you've linked them. If you log into an anonymous account from your home Wi-Fi on your regular device, the site logs your WAN IP address on that connection. If you pay for an anonymous service with a credit card that has your name on it, the payment record exists. These cross-contaminations accumulate. Individually, any of them may seem inconsequential. Together, they build a profile. Data brokers call this linkage analysis, and it's essentially their entire business model, connecting separately held pieces of information until the picture comes together. If you're maintaining genuinely separate identities, they have to be genuinely separate. Different devices, different networks, different payment methods, different apps. The moment you create a connection between them, even a small, apparently harmless one, the separation starts to erode. 5. Trusting tools you haven't verified. Not every privacy app is what it claims to be. There have been VPN apps that have sold user data, browser extensions that tracked everything they claim to protect against, flashlight apps, and yes, I mean literal flashlight apps with spyware embedded in them. The places to look for vetted and scrutinized recommendations are privacy guides and the new oil. Links are in the description. Both apply real critical analysis to the tools they recommend. Active communities on Reddit like r/privacy are also useful, though nosier. Open source matters here. If a tool's code can be publicly inspected, it's much harder to hide surveillance in it. It's not a guarantee. Audits can be incomplete, and most people don't read the code themselves, but it's a meaningful signal. 6. Treating security and privacy like they're the same thing. Privacy protects you from surveillance. Security protects you from attackers. These are related, but not identical, and a gap in one can undermine the other. You can implement every privacy tool in this video and still get completely owned by an unpatched vulnerability in your browser or your operating system. Update your phone, update your apps, update your browser. The threats that get patched in those updates are real. The final one is 7, treating this as binary. The biggest mistake isn't any single tool or practice. It's deciding that because you can't do everything perfectly, there's no point in doing anything. Every layer you add makes you harder to profile, harder to monetize, and harder to track. You don't have to install GrapheneOS on a cash phone and pay for everything with Monero to get meaningful privacy improvements. Revoking app permissions, changing your DNS, using alias emails, and switching to a private search engine will already put you in a significantly smaller and less trackable segment of the population. The surveillance economy runs on volume and frictionlessness. Every piece of friction you introduce, even small amounts of it, reduces your value as a data subject. You don't have to disappear. You just have to make yourself more expensive to track than the next person, which honestly isn't a very high bar. So the conclusion is that your phone isn't listening to you. What it's doing is more pervasive, more systematic, more legal, and considerably harder to see. But it's not invisible, and it's certainly not unstoppable. Most of what actually protects your privacy is accessible to anyone with a smartphone and a free afternoon. The deeper you go, the more effort it requires, and the more convenience you trade away. Where you land on that spectrum is a personal decision based on your threat model, your patience, and your answer to the question of what your privacy is actually worth to you. My dad advice to you: start with the 5-minute stuff. See how it feels. If that's enough, stop there. If it isn't, keep going. The tools are better right now than they've ever been. Use them. If this was useful, if you learned something, or if you now feel a deep existential unease about your flashlight app, hit like and subscribe. Share it with someone who still thinks the microphone is the problem. And if you want me to go deeper on any specific section, the carrier comparison, setting up GrapheneOS, any of it, tell me in the comments. This is how this channel decides what to cover next. This video, between getting the Pixel 7 Pro, a cheap Motorola phone, and trying out Cape for months, cost hundreds of dollars. I think there's value in actually exploring these things for you, but I certainly don't make enough off of YouTube to keep that up. If you want to support my work, please hype the video and consider becoming a member. And speaking of members, I want to thank the new members on the screen for their support. Stay private, stay skeptical, and have a surveillance minimized day, to the degree that that's still possible. See you next time.